I know Power Rangers has its own physics, but how does Kruger's head fit inside his helmet? Hey everyone, and welcome to another Ranger Rant. I'm Archer9234. Today I'll be discussing episode 12 from Power Rangers S.p.D. titled Shadow Part 2. Now, just like Part 1, the episode is adapting episode 14 of Deca Rangers. For the most part, it does follow the nearly identical story elements from Deca Rangers and how Kruger acts inside the episode. Now, the episode resumes right where we left back off, and we find out that, Boom has to take over Kat's duties and in order doing all the scientific and scanning in order to figure out what's been going on. And we basically find out exactly what those spikes are. Basically, how Boom explains is that each spike is part of one larger system that once all of them are connected together, and one with the master spike, which will cause huge seismic disturbances and cause major earthquakes and basically destroying the entire city and, of course, the rest of the world. Now, I understand that Boom is the character of being weak and nervous around people, but Boom was a little bit too nervous in this scene. I really wish he particularly acted more professional in this scene because, again, even though this is not really Boom's job where he has to do all of the scientific stuff inside the command bridge, he should still be able to handle this very easily because, again, he's the tech head. He creates a lot of the stuff, too. Now, eventually, after Boom finally leaves, the Rangers finally confront Doggy Kruger on his actions and finally flat out and says that you're losing it, which is kind of unusual in Power Rangers case because a lot of times we don't like to deal with kind of, people going insane or showing the good characters in a different light of trying to be, flat out bad and unreasonable. So it was cool to see these scenes. And it was also nice because of the Rangers finally confront Kruger and stand up to him instead of, simply obeying him and running out of the room. And this basically forces Kruger to finally tell the Rangers what he skipped inside its backstory. Now, what Kruger basically skipped inside his backstory is basically that even though his entire planet was destroyed and all his friends were murdered, the one thing he skipped was that he has a wife and he was captured by Manon. He doesn't know if she's dead or not, or if she was just simply captured. And that's basically the main reason why he gave up being an officer and helping the Rangers in some sort of capacity. Again, I particularly don't like this when heroes give up just because their wife, father, sister, whatever has died. It always just shows the character's weak and doesn't want to accept reality. And in the end, it just causes more deaths because a lot of people could have been probably saved while Kruger was basically being inactive in his duties. Now I want to talk about Kat and Kruger in S.p.D. and in Deca Rangers. For the most part, Doggy Kruger in S.p.D. and Doggy Kruger in Deca Rangers are nearly identical. Their personalities are identical. The main story elements to their characters are identical. Just their physical appearances are slightly different. Now, a lot of people always wondered that how come Doggy Kruger inside Deca Rangers was more of a believable dog than S.p.D.'s Doggy Kruger? Because in S.p.D., our Doggy Kruger looks more like a lizard/dog appearance with dreadlocks and stuff, so it kind of doesn't look realistic. But also, the Deca Rangers Doggy Kruger doesn't also look realistically either. He looks more like a furry stuffed animal and really cute. That's basically the reason why we don't have the Doggy Kruger in Deca Rangers in S.p.D. Now, for Kat and her counterpart Swanson in Deca Rangers, they do both follow the same similar character developments and personalities. Kat in S.p.D. is the one who builds all the Zords, the morphers, the weapons, etc. And Swanson in Deca Ranger does the exact same thing. Kat is an alien, so is Swanson in Deca Ranger. However, even though Swan is an alien, she is basically humanoid. She doesn't have any extra traits. For example, Kat in S.p.D. is actually a cat alien, has cat traits. She has fangs, she has the ears, which actually do work because we saw in the first part, basically she can actually hear the people behind her that were being ambushed. While Swanson doesn't really have any special traits. She has normal hearing, she doesn't have fangs or anything, and she just acts like a human. Now, this does give people a confusion because if Swanson is just simply a normal human being, why is she called Swan? But then also, why does her suit look like a cat? Basically, in S.p.D., they just wanted to do that usual dynamic where they wanted to put a cat and a dog together. That's the reason why. And since Deca Swan's suit looks like a cat, they just simply made Kat's character in S.p.D. a cat species. Now, eventually, the S.p.D. Rangers head to Piggy once again in order to find more information on what's going on between the monster attack and Manon. And of course, once the S.p.D. Rangers come in, all the alien people who patronage Piggy's new bar area and restaurant area. They run away because, again, they're easily criminals and they don't want to just get arrested. So, of course, Piggy as usually gets annoyed. And as usual, since Piggy doesn't like to give out information for free or likes to lie, the Rangers actually have to force him in order to tell him all the information they need to know. The cool thing I like about this scene is that when the Rangers are basically saying to Piggy, well, we'll actually, bring people here. We'll actually make this our own restaurant and, of course, screw his entire business. So, of course, he relents. But I do like the extra detail they put in, and we find out, like, little backstories of Bridges' character, where we basically find out that he runs the journal for the S.p.d. force. He's also the main leader who controls the learning and curriculum for the C Squad and lower teams, which is actually acknowledged later on in a future episode dealing with the android person Sophie. Eventually, Piggy cracks under the Rangers, promises, and Piggy finally tells the Rangers that Grum is actually on Earth. Now, when the Rangers head back to the base, they finally give all the information that they learned from Piggy to Kruger, and they finally begin a plan. When, unfortunately, Rick, who was damaged in the previous episode, comes in. Rick brings another playback device into the command base, which, again, I thought was really reckless and stupid of Rick, because, again, it could have easily just been a bomb, and it detonated and blew up the entire command area and killing everyone. Now, while Banan explains what he's been done to Kat, we basically find out that he has trapped her inside a cage and actually slaps a countdown timer belt. And we loosely get an explanation of that the belt will just simply vaporize her and turn her into particles. Because as usual, since this is a Disney season, and of course this is Power Rangers in general, they don't like talking about death. And so we always get these awkward moments in S.p.d. whenever someone is threatened to be killed. But in Deca Rangers, this story plot point is nearly identical. Deca Swan does get a belt countdown thing on her, but they basically flat out say that it's just a bomb and she'll just get blown up if you don't come. Now, of course, this is a ruse in order to split up the team, and of course to get Doggy Kruger in order to get into the field so Banan can actually kill him. Jack tries to devise a plan to split up the Rangers, but of course Kruger, since this is his responsibility and this is his fault, basically refuses both of his plans and tells the Rangers to fight off the last robot and the last spike being implemented into the ground. The thing I particularly hated about the scene is that while Kruger is trying to tell the Rangers, that I have a plan, I'll deal with Kat himself. So the Rangers kept bothering him. We need to deal with Kat. We need to deal with Kat. I understand they didn't want to deal with revealing that Doggy Kruger is going to become a Ranger in a few minutes. That's the reason why he doesn't say it. But they could have handled it a little bit more realistic, where Kruger could have said, "I have a plan in place for Kat. I'll deal with it. You deal with this," rather than simply yelling at the Rangers to get out. So while the Rangers head into the Delta Squad Megazord, we see that Kruger heads to Kat's lab and again grabs the case that we saw back in part 1 and opens it. I don't understand why they always try to hide this fact that, there's a morpher inside. This happens a lot of times in Power Rangers. It happened in Jungle Fury. They do all this hiding stuff, and it's basically supposed to be dramatic for either kids who have never seen Power Rangers before. This is their first show, and they don't know what to expect. But for me, when I watched the episode, at this point in time, when I was watching S.p.d., I didn't see Deca Rangers, but I already knew what was going to happen. It was blatantly obvious. Now, when the Rangers finally arrive with the Megazord waiting for the last robot, they do their usual trying with the sword and trying with the gun, and they use their special police tape that has the keep out stuff on it. But during the S.p.d. version of the sequence is that whenever they were using the police tape, they would actually digitally block out the words, because again, if you watch the original Deca Ranger episode, on the police tape, it always says keep out in English, but it also says it in Japanese, so they usually try to block out the tape as much as possible. Now, of course, since Kruger had no other choice, he heads to Banan's location, and we basically see that they're in the usual rock quarry, and we see that Banan pulls up with the truck that has Kat inside. This entire scene is actually identical to what happens in Deca Ranger. Nearly the entire dialogue is identical. The same situation, same aspect of what's happening is identical as well. And for longtime fans, the truck that's in the background is simply just a repaint of the original Ninja Storm truck. So while Kruger and Banan are talking to each other, we kind of get this feel of this kind of Western showdown between the two, and we basically finally find out that Doggy Kruger has his own morpher. Now I'd like to talk about Doggy Kruger's suit and morph. I particularly like Doggy Kruger's morph because it was very unique, that it hasn't been repeated since. It's the only morph that actually has a Ranger falling down and putting his suit on by ripping it off. While other Ranger morphs, either the suit comes on them, they stand still, or they flip up, or the suit comes down on them. For example, Ryan in Lightspeed Rescue, the suit forms when the V comes down on it. But I do have to complain about one thing. Where does Kruger's nose go? You can clearly see that when Kruger's inside his morph suit, the morph suit looks like, an ordinary, regular human being suit. It has normal size hands, normal size boots and a helmet. Kruger's head would not fit in the helmet. His feet is like twice the width of normal-sized people's feet, and his body is overly wide. He would not fit in this Ranger suit. There's no explanation of why this happens. This happens also in Decker Rangers, since Doggy Kruger and Decker Ranger is the same kind of wide, tall dog with the big nose thing, and they even bring it up in Decker Ranger as a joke. There's just no explanation of how this happens. Now, of course, after Kruger morphs, Banan wants to test Kruger, and we basically sent out 100 Crybots for him to fight. Of course, this happens because, again, Kruger's uniform number is 100. There's no real basic explanation of why it's 100. He's just 100. Even in Decker Rangers, there's no real explanation of why he's 100. Now, the 100 indicator is actually from Decker Ranger footage. This is all Decker Rangers. This majority of this entire fight is Decker Rangers. They pretty much copy the exact same fight. He's basically slowly defeating all the Crybots down to 0. But in SPD, they do extend the fight a little bit more longer. They give them extra flips and extra explosions. And you can easily tell when it switches over to US footage, because if you look at the indicator number on the corner, it doesn't perfectly match the Japanese one. And when they switch back to the Japanese footage, it does jump. Now, while Kruger's fighting the Crybots, of course, we head back to the Rangers, and we basically find out that the Rangers are having a huge amount of trouble dealing with the monster trying to send out the last spike. They're trying to hold out as best as they can. And of course, the Delta Squad Megazord is taking a huge amount of pounding. Now, let's talk about the infamous battle cry. Now, for whatever reason, in SPD, the Rangers again are trying, hold back the monster from sending down the last spike. So, of course, they're trying to build up their stamina and courage in order to fight him back and hold him off. But for whatever reason, in the dialogue, all of a sudden the Rangers scream out, battle cry. People have made fun of this for a countless amount of years. For example, on the No Pink Spandex podcast, Lisa J and everyone were just making fun of this scene because it just doesn't make any sense. Why would you say battle cry in this circumstance? It sounds more like a script direction, what you would read on the script in parentheses, battle cry, meaning you would scream at the top of your lungs, something similar to like what happens in Dragon Ball Z. Now, while Kruger's actually defeating the Crybots, if you watch closely, the countdown indicator is not perfectly accurate. If you watch, for example, when he's in the 60s range, you can hear him only hit 2 or 3 of them, but then there's like 10 drop. And it's accurate in some places, like when it slows down in the 40 range, but it's not accurate when it's in 60s or in the 20s. Now, unfortunately, since Kruger had to fight, 100 Crybots, Banan takes advantage of the situation and easily overpowers Doggy Kruger. Banan is getting ready for his final attack, while Cat's bomb belt is counting down for the last seconds. Now, when Banan attacks Doggy Kruger, we see that his main finisher is all the tubes in the back, and it shoots off lasers. This is actually a censoring issue in SPD. What originally happened is that when Banan shoots in Decker Ranger, he's actually shooting rockets out of those tubes, but they were censored as laser weapons in SPD. I don't understand why standards and practices have changed over the years to usually not allow rockets. This is the main reason why whenever you watch the JetX re-airings of MMPR, the rockets from the Dragonzord's finger moves was usually cut for this reason. Fortunately enough, Doggy Kruger withstood the rocket attack on him. Now here comes another censoring issue. When Banan shoots his laser attack at Doggy Kruger, and Doggy Kruger blocks it with his sword and redeflects it toward Cat and actually saves Cat in the process, this was actually censored in SPD. What happened originally in Decker Rangers, Banan's weapon was actually a standard gun weapon that actually shot bullets. Again, since we cannot see realistic weapons in a kid's show, they blocked out the bullet that was being held back on Kruger's sword. Thanks to Kruger thinking at the last second to egg Banan on and actually redirected his energy beam, it shorted out the force field that was protecting Cat and destroyed Cat's belt bomb. Now, of course, at the exact same time, the Rangers finally get the upper hand and finally successfully destroy the robot. Although this doesn't actually explain how they got the spikes out, because if you remember back in part 1 and in the early parts of part 2, they basically say if you touch the spikes, they automatically detonate and are rigged to blow up. Now, of course, as usual, since this is SPD, of course, Kruger has to basically judge Banan of what his atrocities and what he has been doing. Now, I do like to point out during the footage of when, Doggy Kruger is scanning him for either guilty or innocent, they didn't actually put in the visual effects for the SP license. This happened in Decker Rangers. That's the reason why it's not inside the SPD footage. As the series progressed, the Decker Rangers simply ignored adding in the effects until basically when it was confirmed guilty or innocent. And Kruger, of course, judges them again for dealing with Icinia. And surprisingly enough, the patrol morpher actually says he's innocent, which basically says that Banan was not the one who actually captured his wife, and two, Icinia may actually not be dead. I do like to point out one thing though, since again the judgment scene had to be extended because the Icinia stuff had to be added for us for SPD. If you look really closely, they're using of course, the toy for the patrol morpher, but in Deca Ranger's case, Bandai Japan actually gave them customized stickers that didn't have the X and O on the sticker, but in America, they did have the X and O on the prop, so they actually had to digitally block out the stickers on the toy. Now, I do like to talk about one thing. Shadow Saber Finisher was actually censored in SPD. In the original Deca Ranger footage, the flames actually look like normal orange flames. I don't understand why this happened. There's no logical explanation of why they changed the flames to blue. I guess it was too intense for kids, but this doesn't really make any sense when in past Power Ranger seasons, for example, Time Force or Lost Galaxy, they had flames all over the place whenever they did the red finishers or the Battleizer stuff with the Time Force Rangers. There was no problem there. There's no logic. There's just no reason why they changed the flames to blue. And also, there's one change in the ending from Deca Rangers to SPD is that in Deca Rangers, Kruger actually defeated Banan and actually killed them outright. While in SPD, they have to continue with the containment card stuff, and we see it fly out of the flames, which really doesn't make any sense because if you look at the footage when Banan is falling down, which has also been censored as well, in the original Deca Ranger footage, you saw the sparks coming out of his body, but in the SPD footage, they added this, shine effect around his body, so we couldn't see it that well because I guess it was probably too gruesome for SPD. And when he falls down, he blows up, so it doesn't really make any sense why there's a containment card flying out of it. Now, I do have one particular gripe about the ending of the episode, is that when the episode is finally over, and of course Kruger finally defeats Banan, that Kruger basically says he's back, and he's going to, stop bad guys and help the Rangers from now on. But when SPD continues on and we watch later episodes, he actually doesn't follow through with that. He basically stays inside the Delta Command base all the time and doesn't. And even in the next episode, he outright refuses to help the Rangers in any circumstance. That's the one gripe I had with Doggy Kruger's character, both in Deca Rangers and in SPD, because they both do the exact same thing. But the main reason why they do this is because, again, if Doggy Kruger actually helped the Rangers out, he would basically be the 6th Ranger of the team and would have basically screwed the Omega Ranger. For this episode, I have to give it a 3 out of 5. I knock it down a little bit because there were just some things that kind of pissed me off. There was too much censoring in the episode, which didn't make any sense. I do like that the aspect of the Doggy Kruger was actually going crazy because, again, his wife was dead, and they basically treated it as a real-life drama. But I also didn't like how they had to always bounce around the subject of, Icinia either being killed. They had to bounce around the whole thing where, Kat basically had a bomb as a belt on her, and they couldn't say that she would get killed or blown up. They had to do it in this most awkwardest way. And of course, the most infamous scene with the word battle cry. It was ridiculous that they said that, and it was even more stupid when later on in the episode the Rangers do scream. They should have simply cut that scene out where they said battle cry and actually just used it when they screamed. What do you guys think about this episode? Do you agree with me that, the episode was kind of a little bit stupid because they went overboard with certain areas and they had to cover up all the censor stuff because they had to cover up the bullets, the rockets, the bomb? Or do you actually enjoy this episode because it actually does have really good moments where, again, Kat was captured, Doug Kruger had to rescue her, and of course, the whole introduction of this new Shadow Ranger. Of course, leave your comments below on what you think on this episode, and of course, leave your comments below on what future episodes you would like me to review. For next week's rant, I'll be discussing Catastrophe from Power Rangers SPD. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys right back here next week.